So yesterday, Nintendo pushed an update out on Nintendo Switch that did a bunch of little things like making it easier for you to transfer your screenshots and that off the system, but there were some things that stood out as a bit odd. A bit sus, as my fellow hip kids would say. Now again, a small thing here, but for one, both the NES and SNES game apps got updates that nobody really knows what they're for. There wasn't like any details on them or anything, and no new games were added either. Also, there's a new button front and center on your homepage for the Nintendo Online service. You can go in there, and it gives you details as well as lets you access things like your cloud saves, talks to you about games you have that you can play online, special offers, as well as a section on the NES and SNES games. If you go in there, you get like a release date calendar type thing. You can sort by all the games or individual consoles, but it lists out in order like when all the games came out. It's actually kind of cool. They have these little like notifications on some of them that you can click on that'll be like, you were about to turn 5 years old when this game came out, because they use like your birthday, so like you can kind of track like where you were around the time some of these games came out, which I thought was cool. And also, each game has a product page with a description and trailer now, very much like you would see on a game's store page. So the question is, of course, being raised, what's going on? Why is this happening? Why now? And this setup with the release dates as well as being able to separate the games by console seems like it would be prime to have more games added, both from these consoles as well as other ones. How cool would it be to be able to, go through the whole time span of Nintendo's back catalog? So the idea is coming up again, is Nintendo preparing to add not just more games to this service, but more games from more consoles, specifically what people want, obviously, the N64, GameCube, that coveted GameCube lineup, and of course the Wii. I'm going to say straight up, considering all the other things that have been going on, I think that is very possible. And I've been floating this idea for a while that I think we're set to see some sort of virtual console return soon. The business to be done, money to be made off of Nintendo's back catalog is insane, no doubt. And the fact that the rollout has been so slow and weak with legacy games this generation, I mean, the Wii and the Wii U were both light years ahead of the Switch at this point. I mean, the Switch is almost 4 years old, guys, remember. The Wii U barely made it that long, and it had all kinds of old game offerings on it at this point. Not to mention, as I've discussed in just about every video that I've mentioned this game, the Mario 3D All-Stars Collection and it being a time-limited deal, with it being set to be removed on March 31st of next year. Said it a bunch of times, as well as with the Fire Emblem stuff and that. Makes no sense to me for Nintendo to stop making money off these games, so I'm of the belief that they will be made available just in a different way. And if they are going to start adding games from other consoles, what better games to start with than the big Mario games from each of those systems? Maybe get Galaxy 2 in there as well on the Wii, I wouldn't complain about that. And plus, speaking of these Mario games, we know all the games on that collection are running on emulators on the Switch, so it's like they've already got their own emulation running for each of these systems currently on the Switch, and obviously they're running well, as the performance for these games was solid, at least in my opinion, across the board. Now, in terms of the monetization, like how will they present all this, it could be more of the same, everything tied to the Nintendo Online service, which I'm sure everyone would be just delighted to hear, and perhaps whatever does come would be included with your subscription fee. But, I've said in the past, I don't see how that happens without a raise in price or like tiered pricing. So, you pay a separate fee for N64, a separate fee for GameCube access, etc. When they just charged us $60 for 3 retro 3D Mario games, I don't see them just loading these services up with games that they offer to us for $20 a year. I don't see that happening. But obviously there's an alternative, and like with these new product pages, like I mentioned, they look like a game store page, and there's a little start software button on there, and that could just as easily become a buy it now button. And I could see that being a thing even in conjunction with the current Nintendo Online offerings, where perhaps you do go in and buy the games outright, and those titles kind of merge with the ones that are included with the online service. Like perhaps you can add, let's call them premium games by buying them, and that's where the bulk probably of the newer console games would be. Maybe Nintendo does put some in with the subscription here and there, but the main idea is for you to buy them outright. Like even thinking about this in terms of the consoles we already have, okay? You take the SNES app, you've got the included games in there. What if you can go into the eShop? Hopefully they do more of a virtual console thing for buying the retro titles. I really hope if they go this route, they get their own section so they're easier to find and browse. But yeah, what if it's like you go in, you buy, let's say, Super Castlevania 4 for, say, $5. And when you purchase the game, it gets added into the Super Nintendo app, like when they add games to the service now. This way you do have like all your retro games for each system in one place, even though you've got some that are from Nintendo Online and some that you've bought in a more virtual console type fashion. Also, this way you could build a library without having everything tied to the online. Like obviously, if you cancel the online subscription, you'd lose access to all the games that are included with it, but you'd also keep all the games you bought individually. So if down the line you decide to cancel the subscription, it's not like you're losing all the retro games you have on the Switch. Again, you just apply this to the newer consoles as well. The games, obviously, they would cost a bit more, but this way you could kind of have the best of both worlds with having a virtual console type system where, people buy and keep those games, as well as the sub model that gives people access to a bigger library on the cheap, and then people can view everything together to see, their complete collection. I do think the stars are aligned on this. The only thing that makes me cautious is Nintendo's history with this stuff on the Switch. Like the drip feeding that has been so bad this entire generation, it's hard for me to believe that, boom, one day they're just going to dump 3 more consoles on us all of a sudden. But they very well could. And they could start small with 5 to 10 games for each system. Maybe there's a bit of a rollout like N64 1 month, and then GameCube comes out a month, a couple months later, then Wii. And again, maybe they only start with a few games, including the 3D Mario All-Star games, and then they build from there. But at the same time, I know I'm not alone in thinking that it just seems nuts that they've been doing such a worse job in this department than they've done on all their past recent systems, especially with how the Switch is easily the best system for retro gaming, with it allowing you to play games both on the TV and in handheld mode. It's almost like you get 2 versions of the games on the Switch. So maybe they're also just kind of waking up and thinking we need to start catching up to ourselves, our older consoles, and start making that money. Now, as I've said in the past, myself, I am down to buy these games once again, even though I don't want to think about how many times I've bought in Super Metroid, Star Fox 64. It's getting ridiculous. So at the same time, in this age where we're getting so much more in terms of backwards compatibility, obviously Microsoft is just killing it in that department with the Xbox family of systems, and even Sony now seems to be at least coming around with the PS5 offering back compat on most PS4 titles. So I think it would be time for Nintendo to start doing the thing they hate the most and be a bit more pro-consumer. And when they roll this out, tell people hey, this is the main virtual console type experience going forward. When the next Nintendo system comes out, you're going to be able to seamlessly bring these games over and not have to buy them once again. Because not only do I think it's more pro-consumer, obviously people would rather not buy these games again, I also think the rebuying is kind of a double-edged sword for the publisher, for Nintendo. You may think, oh, they get to charge you for the same game twice, but that also keeps people from wanting to build a big retro digital library when it may just go away with the next gen. With that possibility, most people are just going to stick to grabbing their absolute favorite games. So for someone like myself, if they came out right away and told me that, hey, these games are going to be protected, they're going to come with you into the future, I would have no problem going nuts and buying all sorts of retro digital games. Maybe ones I'm not even that interested in, just to have them, if I was assured they were going to stay with me going into the future. But yeah, I do think this is something that's inevitable, adding more games and more consoles to the Switch's retro offerings. and it seems like we're getting more and more hints at that happening soon with things like these new app updates, as well as stuff like these anniversary retro games just supposedly disappearing after March 31st of next year. So I do think by or around that time, we'll likely hear more about Nintendo's plans in this arena. I just hope, whatever the details are, it's stuff we want to hear. Anyway, with that, this video's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts on the potential coming of, N64, GameCube, and Wii games to the Nintendo Switch console. Do you think this is where we're headed? How would you like to see these games be offered up? Like, would you like to see more of the subscription model? Do you prefer to more so buy your games and not be tied to having to stay subscribed to play them? Of course, what do you want to see Nintendo do? And what do you think they'll actually do? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of the potential imminent arrival of N64, GameCube, and even Wii games on the Nintendo Switch system. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. And if you want to keep the conversation going, hit me up on Twitter @JohnnyZakari, and join my Discord, ChiGuy and Friends. Link to both in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.